Hello, and welcome back to the About the Labor podcast. I am BJ Reidell, here with my friend Drew Mahowald, and today I decided to switch up the intro line just to see if you guys have been paying attention. But we do have a Vikings football game to talk about today. Very exciting stuff, obviously. Big Thanksgiving win for the Vikings. It got a little bit tense towards the end there, shaking in my boots a little bit if I was wearing boots. But the Vikings ultimately come out with a W. That's 7 straight wins now. This team is absolutely rolling. Plenty of good things to talk about, but also some bad stuff too. There were some major issues in this game, and we'll talk about all that and plenty more on standard rapid reaction episode of the podcast. So without further ado, let's get the sponsor note out of the way here. Starting with SOCOM Creative, once again, folks. Is your website ugly? It's time for an upgrade. It's almost 2018. If your website doesn't look good on a smartphone, you are losing money. That's just how it is. It's time to call an audible. Take your business to the next level with a professional quality website or mobile app. Thank us later. The world is changing. It's time to score touchdowns. Stop missing field goals. If you want your business to grow online, you need a web, social media, and mobile presence. That gets the job done. SOCOM Creative will do just that. They build apps, websites, create winning strategies, and you can check them out at www.socomcreative.co. That's SOCOM creative.co. Make sure to check them out, guys. All right, so let's jump right into this football game. As we were just discussing before we started recording here, probably the biggest football game of the year for the Vikings. At least right now on paper, it certainly seems that way. We start with the quarterback every week. This week is no different. What did you see from Case Keenum? How did you feel about his performance at Ford Field?
Yeah, it was another excellent performance of Case Keenum. We're seeing a different Case Keenum pre-bye week to post-bye week, and it's, obviously it's phenomenal to see a guy like that rise the way he has. But I still feel like that this is the same Case Keenum that we've all seen his entire career. It's just that the difference, again, is when you get a scheme that's being called and executed as well as Pat Shurmur's executing it. You have an offensive line's protecting as well as this offensive line's protecting. You have a running game that, against the Lions, it wasn't exactly phenomenal, but it was enough to keep the Lions honest on defense. And then you have Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs, Kyle Rudolph as pass catchers who are as reliable as any trio in the league. You have a quarterback that inherently is going to see production increase, numbers increase, etc. I think that's what you're seeing with Case Keenum here. He's getting time to throw, and he's able to miss off on some throws, but he has receivers that'll make those catches, and he has, again, and this is no secret either, that his pocket movement is excellent. So you combine all that together, and I think you have a quarterback who can thrive in an offense like this, and I think you're seeing it right now. By the way, Pat Shurmur's red zone offense and his play calling continues to get better. And I don't know how he keeps coming up with weird ideas to misdirect defenses. It's unbelievable. Yeah. And Case Keenum's executing the plays really well. That read option yesterday was awesome. But he's got this offense humming. And at some point, and if you again, I said this last week, if you haven't been at least swayed by how well Keenum's playing right now, or at least convinced that he's the guy for the rest of the season at this point, I think you should be at least swayed to some degree in favor of Keenum, because this offense, again, it's top 5 caliber in the league, and you have to at least give some credit to Case Keenum here at some point.
Yeah, it's definitely time to give credit to Case Keenum if you haven't already, like you just said. This is now 4, borderline, elite level performances from him. If you, go all the way back to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers game, then you got the Redskins game, the Rams game obviously last week, and now this phenomenal performance against the Lions. So that's 4 phenomenal performances. That's actually now outweighing the, quote, poor performances, maybe 2 or 3 depending on your vantage point there. So Case Keenum is looking like the real deal. I think it's time to start talking about, instead of asking the question, is Teddy Bridgewater, better than Case Keenum? Maybe we should be asking, and I'm saying this to myself, by the way, maybe we should be asking, is Case Keenum, is this guy potentially the future at the position for the Vikings? I think it's time to open up that question at this point. I'm not saying there's a definitive answer either way here, but you've seen a lot of really good things from Case Keenum. The pocket manipulation thing is just, he's doing that at a very elite level, guys.
Yep.
His feel. And it's a chemistry thing. This is, this goes back to his intangibles. It's a feel for the position. It's like he just knows when the pocket is collapsing. He stepped into a sack this week for the first time in 2 months. He's been absolutely phenomenal in that way. And, what might make this most recent performance against Detroit maybe his best or his second best is because his offensive line did not protect him nearly as well as we have seen in previous games. So, the boosters, the people, like you just said, there's very good reason behind this, but he's always been playing with these really great pieces surrounding him, whether it's the offensive line, the wide receivers, the tight end. Kyle Rudolph had a phenomenal day. All the different weapons, the running game playing, efficiently, I suppose. That's all well and good, but when plays broke down, we saw Case Keenum make big time throws. On third down, Jarius Wright made a couple of huge catches. Adam Thielen had, of course, he had another couple of big ones. Stephon Diggs, of course. There's so many different guys that are doing a lot of things that are helping Case Keenum, but, we can't, at this point, there is no way we can diminish the fact that he is playing well. He is exceptional, and I mean, it's one of those things where, for me, you try to stay along the lines of your same take. Like, I thought that Teddy Bridgewater was the guy, and you try to stick to that path. But it's just gotten to the point, like you just said, where if you're not thinking that Case Keenum might actually be the answer at this point, I don't know what else he needs to do for you. Seriously.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's still fair to think that Teddy Bridgewater's ceiling is still higher. But, right. I mean, again, I was wrong about this too, that the risk of putting Teddy Bridgewater in the game would have behooved the Vikings to see, what he could do in this offense, which I'm still very curious about that. But the guy hasn't played for so long. We know all the risks that there are involved. And I think when you have an offense humming this well, like it's literally a top 5 unit in the league in, yards per play, first downs, explosive plays, all of these things, why would you mess up the guy who's leading the charge there? And I've been swayed by his play the last 3 weeks, and I think most people should be. It's been phenomenal the last 3 weeks, especially against what I consider really good opponents in at Washington, then the Rams, who are 7-3 now, and the Lions, who were the Vikings' best challenge for the division on the road in a tough place to play. So huge win, and I think this offense, especially in that first half, man, that was something to watch. And if it wasn't for a couple kicking mishaps, this game would have been 34-23. I mean, they would have had 34 points, and essentially this game would have been way over before it got close near the end. So, and shout out to I hate the line of, well, I'm going to blame the officials because this game was close, but to a degree, the officials kind of kept Detroit in this one, I would say.
Yeah, that was definitely a poor officiating performance, to say the least. The Stephon Diggs pass
interference was
that was really something. But Case Keenum, so what did we learn new about Case Keenum this week, if anything? Because I feel like, with this conversation, whether it's, Teddy versus Sam, Teddy versus Keenum, Keenum versus the world, whatever it is, it's always been kind of, we get back to the same point. So have we learned anything new about Case Keenum to this point? Is he doing something that, I guess, I don't want to say unexpected because this is kind of all unexpected, but is he doing something new now that he wasn't doing, say, week 3 against Tampa Bay?
I think the pocket movement has been a tremendous improvement throughout the season, and I think we saw more examples of that on Thanksgiving Thursday. But I think now we can drop the whole debate in general. Like, I thought if Case falters this week, maybe given the long break, the Vikings would have an opportunity to integrate Teddy. But with each week he's playing a better game, and I mean it's not like it's a very roller coaster kind of situation like it was the first before the bye week. It's steady. He's not turning the ball over. He's making and his accuracy has improved a ton. I think that debate can officially be kind of diminished, and now we can kind of have the stability here of Teddy on the sidelines as a backup in the event of an injury, and then Case will be the starter. And I feel like Zim won't give into that because he'll always want to have. I think he'll always kind of say, "Well, we never know," because I think that presence of Teddy there, as in Case not officially the starter the rest of the season, is making Case. His performance is increasing. I think because of that. I think he has an extra mindset, another extra thing in his mind where I think he feels like he has to play well, and it's helping him. So I think I'm going to drop the debate myself. I'm not going to think about Teddy Bridgewater as a starter unless there's an injury. But I think Case Keenum's a guy. I think we should all get behind him because he's throwing he's been phenomenal. It's straight up. He's been phenomenal the last 3 weeks. And I think Patrick Royce dropped this tweet the other day. I think it was actually yesterday. He said, top 3 quarterbacks since 2000. 1, Nick Culpepper, 2, Brett Favre, 3, Case Keenum. It's possible.
I mean, there's definitely an argument for it. I mean, I want to revisit the question that I've been asking the last couple of weeks on Case Keenum, and that's basically, is this guy good enough to take you to a Super Bowl? I'm thinking at this point he's leading a top 10 offense. So even if Teddy Bridgewater does have a higher ceiling than him, I think a top 10 offense is going to get it done with this defense.
Yeah.
Right? So
sure.
At this point, like even if, like hypothetically speaking, let's say Teddy Bridgewater is everything that, we want him to be, I suppose. Let's say that that's actually true. Do you even need to? You don't need him at this point. I mean, because Keenum is literally driving a top 10 offense.
This is what I was kind of fighting in my mind was, at what point is Case Keenum going to drop off? We kind of thought this was sort of a little honeymoon phase where he was just playing really good football. Vikings were winning. We thought, okay, well, at some point he's going to go back to being the real Case Keenum. But I've come to think that this is the real Case Keenum all along, and that when you get a quarterback again in a terrific situation like this, he's going to perform, in the eye and perceptibly better than he has in the past. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. And I mean, sure, I think he himself, his performance individually has increased, especially after the bye week. But again, when you get a guy in this situation, it's always going to lift his performance when you have the weapons and the supporting cast he has and the scheme Pat Shurmur's running. So I think moving forward, sizable, let's say, lift for Teddy Bridgewater as well. But there is that risk again of, how is he going to perform after the injury? How would he deal with getting hit the first time, etc.? So Case Keenum's the guy. He's playing awesome football, and again, I'm going to say this like I did last week. He's in the MVP conversation.
Yeah.
Just because of, the last 3 weeks especially. The Vikings, you could argue the last 3 weeks. Well, maybe not the Rams game, but at least the Lions game and the Redskins game. That if there's a very good chance that the Vikings don't win one of those games if it's not Case Keenum at quarterback.
Absolutely. Okay, so I want to kind of vault off of the point that you just brought up here, that Case Keenum is in the MVP conversation. This is going to be brief. I actually don't even want to talk about Case Keenum here, just because I think that it is fairly obvious at this point that if the quarterback is playing well and the team is 9-2, he just inherently kind of enters the conversation just because of the power of the position. But how about Adam Thielen as an outside MVP candidate? Because, and this is my reasoning here. Generally speaking, we don't think of wide receivers as even, possible to be MVPs because they are so reliant on the quarterback position. But we have been harping for 6 weeks now that Adam Thielen is making Case Keenum better. He's making Pat Shurmur better. He's making Pat Shurmur's job easier, I should say. He's literally making the offense better. And the question that leads to is he having a more significant impact on this offense than Case Keenum? That's basically the question you have to ask if you're debating those two players as the most valuable to this team or to the league, whatever it is. And I think Thielen has a really good case here, no pun intended. I mean, he's been outstanding. I've been very excited to say this on the show. He is the first Minnesota Vikings wide receiver to cross the 1,000-yard plateau since Sidney Rice back in 2009. That's an incredible feat. It's been way too long. He's doing everything extremely well. I mean, if every wide receiver took the same path that Adam Thielen did in terms of work ethic and just grinding it out, getting through adversity, all of that stuff, no talent would be wasted in this league because he has literally gone about his business from day one, and he has become a supreme, elite caliber wide receiver in this NFL, and I'm not afraid to say that at this point.
Oh, no. I don't think anybody should be afraid to say that.
It shouldn't be.
But the game, I mean, watching the game, it speaks for itself what he does to opposing defensive backs. We saw that little stutter and go out of the slot last week against the Rams. I can't remember who the DB was, but he literally fell over. And,
it was embarrassing.
I mean, that's just an example of what Thielen can do as a route runner and as the acceleration, the burst, it's unreal what he has turned into. And I would there's a very good argument for him to be the the non-QB MVP of the NFL right now.
Absolutely.
Because I think he has been the catalyst of this kind of offensive revolution for the Vikings. I would also say Pat Shurmur's play calling is probably the MVP of this offense kind of turning into what it is, but the offensive line is a big part of it as well. Riley Reif, either Rashad Hill or Mike Remmers, whoever you want to say at that right tackle spot. I think those guys protecting Case Keenum for the most. I mean, the Detroit game wasn't as superb, but in the past and throughout the season, it's been really, really good in comparison to last season. So those three things together, I think Thielen's emergence, Pat Shurmur being Pat Shurmur this season, and then this offensive line drastically improved from last year are really the three things I look at when I look at this offense and what it is this season compared to what it was last season. Because I think the pieces were in place last year for this offense to be kind of the way it is right now. But you had so many injuries. You had a running game that was averaging 3 yards a carry. And I think the pieces weren't in place, and they just had to fix a few things, and they've done that this year. And regardless of who the QB is, I mean, if it was Bradford, Teddy, Case, whoever it is right now, I think the Vikings offense would be humming at this level anyway.
Yeah, there's a strong argument to be made that even Kyle Sloter could be running, a winning team at this point. I
can't remember who tweeted this yesterday. I can't remember who it was, but they said, the Vikings have 3, maybe 4 QBs on their roster better than any quarterback on the Browns roster, which is kind of funny. I mean, it's a fair take, isn't it? Depending on how you feel about Deshaun Kaiser.
Right, but. Yeah, I mean, there's an argument, obviously, that Kaiser could develop, but that's just taking the fun out of the tweet. I mean, Yep. Thielen was amazing once again. Keenum was amazing once again. That running game, you mentioned earlier, kind of an up-and-down performance.
Yeah.
But here's what I boiled it down to with this running performance. It was, it wasn't always good, but when it needed to be good, it was. And this is what I want to point to here. Coming out of the second half, I know that the Vikings obviously ended up blowing the lead to a degree anyway. They're blowing it down to, too close for comfort. But the way they came out in the second half, 4 plays, 75 yards, 4 rush attempts, 1 touchdown. Mm-hmm. The first 3 carries, 46 yards for Latavius Murray, 16 for McKinnon, 11 for McKinnon, and then Murray finishes up with 2 yards. That is imposing your will on a defense. Coming out of the second half, likely a scripted series of plays, and Pat Shurmur basically just said, I'm going to run down your throat 4 straight plays and we're going to score. 2 minutes. That's what the Vikings did to the Lions. And that's the type of running game, that's kind of the ceiling of this running game, that you can mix and match these guys and get a variety of different types of, run, stretch plays, 8 tosses, run it up the gut with I form, single back. I mean, you can do all different types of stuff with both of these rushers, and they protect extremely well. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, this running back position is as good in terms of overall depth as it really has ever been, at least since I started watching the Vikings.
And are you talking about without Dalvin Cook?
Even without Dalvin Cook, yeah.
That's without Dalvin Cook.
Right.
And it's been, I would look back to, let's see, it might be we had Adrian Peterson.
There's Adrian Peterson, Chester Taylor, and then there was Mwelde Moore, and who was it with Mwelde Moore?
We're over the top of Mwelde Moore here. I mean,
right, I understand that, but I'm saying, in terms of overall depth, there was
Michael Bennett, Mo Williams.
Then Mwelde Moore was in there too. He was also
he? Okay. Yeah. So I'm thinking the 2004 time, which is when the Vikings offense was probably its last most explosive time. Right. So I mean, I would tend to agree with that. I think that shows the lack of depth there has been at the running back position in recent memory. When you obviously have Adrian Peterson on the team, but after that, the depth wasn't quite there. Man, Asiata, Jerick McKinnon was there a little bit, but I think Latavius Murray gives a reliable thunder to the lightning. I keep saying that combination, but I think it's pretty fair here. And let's stop with this talk about Latavius Murray being an expensive Man Asiata, because he doesn't resemble anything Man Asiata does, because he does it he's an ultra version of Matt Asiata, and I think that is probably insulting to him. So Latavius Murray, Jerick McKinnon, the running game is drastically improved from last year. Obviously, credit goes to the offensive line as well, but those 2 guys are in sync with this unit, and they do come up with big runs and big plays. And Latavius Murray has a nose for the goal line, which the Vikings did not have last year in any short yard situation with any running back. So I think that too needs to be pointed out. But another excellent day. I believe they did pass over 100 yards with that, especially with the help of that long run. So that was a statement drive too, because that was kind of the end of the first half was a little bit iffy.
Right,
We thought this game might fall out of the Vikings' hands. That drive was big. So credit to the running game, credit to those running backs, credit to the offensive line for making that drive happen.
So basically, we can boil it down to that, with exception to Adrian Peterson, Chester Taylor, Latavius Murray, Jerick McKinnon is probably the best running combination the Vikings have had in the last decade or so, maybe 15 years, something like that. Fair to say. And it's let's keep this in mind here. That's a 6th-round pick and a 3rd-round pick. Two guys that, when McKinnon was drafted.
Yeah, that's without Dalvin Cook on the field.
Without Dalvin Cook on the field, right. So just there it is. So let's talk about Kyle Rudolph a little bit here, just before we jump into the defensive side of the show. I don't think he gets enough love on this show, just because for one, he tends to be a guy that gets, 2 receptions for 27 yards and one of them's a touchdown, and it's easy to kind of breeze past him. Sure. But Rudolph today, with exception to looking extremely slow, that's fine, by the way. I don't care if he's slow as long as he's, catching the ball and scoring. It doesn't really matter to me. He was exceptional today. Gets wide open in the back of the end zone. Perfect play design, great play action call by Pat Shurmur. And then he gets, he catches, he's on the receiving end of that absolute dime that Case Keenum threw down the right sideline.
That was a dime piece right there.
Might be Case Keenum's best throw of the year. And he's probably got 6 or 7 solid candidates for his best throw. That might have been the best one, dropping it into, I believe there's 2 DBs collapsing, as that ball touched down into Rudolph's arms. Big play for him. We've mentioned all of these different pieces now, and Kyle Rudolph, he said it himself that basically it's kind of a new guy every single week, and how the question I want to pose to this is how comfortable are you with the fact that literally the Vikings, if you run into a Bill Belichick in the playoffs who likes to shut down your number one weapon, that's always been his goal, that's his thing. So let's say they shut down Adam Thielen, and just for kicks, because it's Bill Belichick, let's say they also control the running game, and the Vikings aren't doing it on the ground either. Are you comfortable with the fact that you still got Stephon Diggs and Kyle Rudolph out there as probably getting one-on-one matchups if he's taking away those types of things? Because it looks really good on paper right now.
It does. I'm a little bit concerned, and this is hypothetical about the Vikings keeping up with Tom Brady, but again, Kyle Rudolph has been, it's very under the radar, actually, how much production he has put up the last few weeks. I believe this was actually his first game since the Lions game, the previous Lions game, that he didn't have 5 catches in a game.
Really?
Which might, because I remember looking at that stat. I believe the Vikings PR account tweeted that this week, that he had at least 5 or more catches in every game since going back to the Bears Monday night game. So, and I think that went under the radar pretty significantly, just by the rise of Adam Thielen, Case Keenum's performance, everything kind of hid the fact that Rudolph was really performing and being that safety blanket for Case Keenum throughout the whole season. So we got to give credit to Kyle Rudolph, and again, I thought he blocked pretty well yesterday as well. So big day for Kyle Rudolph. I think he kind of, he was due for a touchdown or 2. It had been a while since he had scored, and I think he was due. And that throw from Case Keenum to him on that 7 route there, I think it was a corner flat combo. Just a dime. I mean, you couldn't have placed that one any better.
No, you couldn't.
If you had frozen time and you had seen where Rudolph would be at the end of the route, you could literally have not placed the ball better than the way Case Keenum did on that throw.
Absolutely, and just there was very little room for error on that throw too, which just makes it makes the pass that much more beautiful, because he had the boundary working against him at that point too. He needed to have some touch on that throw. There's so many
held
different...
the safety in there too. Held the safety in just enough too to open that window.
Literally, and it was like if that ball had arrived, a split second later, that's either that could have been a pass defensed or an interception potentially. Regardless, my point being here is beautiful pass by Case Keenum. As a whole, the offense, very complete game. I think this is a well-rounded performance from this offense, something they can definitely hang their hats on, something they can definitely build off of. If you get this type of performance from your offense every single week, especially with this Vikings defense, you definitely feel comfortable beating just about anyone on paper. So moving on to the defense, though, maybe one of the more interesting performances from this defense this year because it was so strange, I suppose. Xavier Rhodes was not Xavier Rhodes at all. 111 yards allowed for Xavier Rhodes, 2 touchdowns. I mean, coming into this game, I believe he was under 500 yards total for the entire season.
Yeah.
So weird on that end, especially because, and I want to just get this out there because a lot of people have thrown this my way. Yeah, Marvin Jones burnt the hell out of my take. Absolutely. Yep. But I stand by it because, again, I think my reasoning was solid, and I don't like the result.
Now's not a good time, BJ. Now's not a good time.
I know that, but I don't like the result, but I still like the process. Put it that way. So good on Marvin Jones. Rhodes was not Rhodes, but he comes up with that big interception at the end of the game, kind of a little Trey Waynes-esque, I suppose, getting burned all day and then making him pay at the last second. It's like if you poke the bear too many times, eventually he's going to bite your head off, and that's kind of what happened with Xavier Rhodes there, and that was nice to see. But Trey Waynes did not play well either. Kenny Galladay, for what it's worth, made a hell of a play downfield on that 40-yard reception or whatever it was. But he got burnt a couple times. I think he allowed over 60 yards. Harrison Smith allowed over 30 yards for, I think, the first time in like 6 weeks or something like that, which is out of character for him. Basically, Matthew Stafford did a hell of a job attacking the Vikings defensive backs because the linebackers were not that involved, and to some degree, you kind of expect guys like Theo Riddick and Amir Abdullah to be bigger threats, catching the ball in flats, out of the backfield and stuff like that. And Jim Bob Cooter just didn't do a whole lot of that. Anthony Barr was very good when given the opportunity. There was one particular play, a potential game-saving play that he made when Golden Tate caught a ball on a flat route where he got kind of based off of the design. Mike Zimmer was willing to sacrifice a couple of yards and have Anthony Barr stuck in coverage against Golden Tate, basically because you're assuming that the flat route on that play, and he got it, and Barr basically caught up to him, made a hell of a tackle. So overall, the coverage was not good, but there were some standout performances, Mackenzie Alexander, Terrence Newman as well. But I think the real story here is Everson Griffin once again. Another multi-sack performance, pressure all day, beating down on Taylor Decker, who was a very good offensive tackle, a young guy that's going to be even better as the years go on for here. So Griffin comes out with a big performance. He's FaceTiming his childbirth before the game.
Yeah.
What did you see from him? What does this say about the player that he can go through all these personal things, and yet when he steps on the field, he's the same monster he always is?
Yeah, I think I was looking at his Twitter feed today, and someone had asked, why is he at the game, or why is he playing football when he's, having a son? But
right.
he mentioned that, the due date was December 16th, I believe. So it was very unexpected, obviously, and he's already on the plane and in Detroit. Right. So he couldn't really do much about it. So he just kind of went out there and played football and tried to get a name for his kid. I don't know if you saw the shirt that he unveiled when he got that first sack, but yeah, he's been dominant all season long, and I think he even probably deserves more sacks than he has, because a lot of times, teams are either A, giving extra help to the left tackle, or B, QBs are more aware of where he is than where the rest of the defensive line is, so they are paying more attention to him, and he's getting a lot more pressure than he probably should, and more pressure than 12 sacks he has now is gives credit for. So I think he's been probably the best. He's definitely the best candidate for defensive player of the year on this defense. And a phenomenal game by him. He was the best player on the defense yesterday. I thought Anthony Barr again was very, very good. That play on Golden Tate was huge. It saved what could have been a touchdown drive. Could have turned this game completely upside down. He made a play there. I was very surprised how much the Lions actually targeted Xavier Rhodes.
It was was it 10? I think it was 10 times that I marked
11 targets. A lot of them were in crucial moments of the game.
Yeah.
Either third down, red zone, etc. I've never seen a team go at Xavier Rhodes that much. Maybe this exposes him a little bit. Maybe teams start to go after him a little bit more, because that was part of the success Rhodes had all year long, was that teams just weren't going his way, and then suddenly he gets 11 targets thrown his way. Marvin Jones has some success. I think he had that touchdown catch he had, the second one with 12 men on the field.
Yeah.
I feel like
Newman
Stafford
was trying to get off the field, and Rhodes.
Right.
And
I don't think Stafford even saw Newman. I don't think he even saw him, because he threw that ball. I think it feels like he thought Jones was in single coverage, and Newman was just kind of hiding behind Rhodes there.
Right.
And somehow Jones made that catch. I don't understand that one. That was dumb. It should have been just a 10-yard penalty or whatever it is. But regardless, I'm slightly concerned about Rhodes as a shutdown just because of how much the Lions targeted him and how much success they had. Do I think this will be an ongoing theme? No, but I do think if you get a receiver better than Marvin Jones, which there are a lot of them, as you would probably tell me.
Yeah, I would tell you that.
Yeah, if you get a receiver and a quarterback combo that's better than Stafford and Jones that likes to go after Rhodes, I think it's possible that you see something like this again down the road, unless the hands and the grabbiness is fixed.
See, the reason why I don't think that there's any reason to worry about Rhodes moving forward, despite the fact that Julio Jones is up next, is because he was in good coverage like 90% of the time on these targets. He had the magic play that you just mentioned.
That was absurd.
That one was absurd. And then there was also the crazy play on the left side of the field where Marvin Jones made another heck of a catch on Rhodes. So I think that he played actually well in coverage. He just got beaten by Marvin Jones a couple times. I mean, Marvin Jones is known to do this to a degree, right? He had the two 200-yard games last year. I mean, it's always been a consistency thing with him, and that's why I'm not a fan of Marvin Jones, is because he shows up for 200 one week and 5 the next week. But he definitely, the real Marvin Jones stood up today, or at least, the better Marvin Jones, I suppose. But I don't think that Rhodes is going to have a problem moving forward just because he wasn't necessarily doing anything wrong. He was just kind of getting screwed as the cornerback position sometimes does. Remember, this is a position that's probably going to allow 50% completion.
Like, for example, Wayne's on that long one to Galladay. Like, right. I thought Wayne's, he could have turned his head around, but a receiver's not supposed to make that catch,
Right.
And that ball's not supposed to be in a perfect spot like that. And both of those things happened. Wayne's in a good spot. This is kind of the story of his career, where he's in an excellent spot. The positioning is great, and he just either A, doesn't make a play on the ball, or B, the throw and catch are perfect. And I think we did see that a couple times yesterday with Rhodes. But again, the worry I have is Julio Jones and Matt Ryan are up next, and
right,
that's probably if not the best, one of the best wide receiver quarterback combos in the league.
First or second, one of the two.
Yeah, it's up there. It's up there. So big test again for Xavier Rhodes. We're going to see how we're going to learn a lot about Xavier Rhodes. Yeah, because this arguably it's one of the worst performances he's had in terms of yards and touchdowns given up in a few years. So we're going to learn about, how much he's progressed as a player, how he responds to this. Obviously the interception helps, and the coverage he had on that play was really good to, deflect that pass and make a play. We'll see how he responds in a new game and with a much tougher challenge next week.
The one thing I want to point out here before we move on to something else is that I think it's important to note that Matthew Stafford has an absolute rocket for an arm. So he if anyone is capable of fitting balls into tight windows, that sounds awful, by the way, phrasing there. But if anyone's capable of it, it's Matthew Stafford. He's the guy that can beat you despite very little separation just because of that. That's the difference between a Case Keenum, an undrafted player, and a Matthew Stafford, a number 1 overall pick. That type of elite arm strength. So that is one thing to keep an eye on, I suppose, when you see guys like Cam Newton coming up in a couple of weeks here. Very powerful arm, drives the ball downfield. Maybe that's the type of kryptonite for Xavier Rhodes. Maybe that's the worst case scenario for him as far as opposing quarterbacks goes. Guys that can fit the ball, gunslingers that can fit the ball into tight windows with velocity, Brett Favre type guys. Put it that way. So I expect him to rebound, though. He's always played very well against Julio Jones. We've talked about that in the past. He normally gets up against Julio Jones. I expect him to next week. But as far as the rest of the defense goes, any other standout plays or anything that you saw? Terrence Newman had a couple of big plays once again. Yeah. Mackenzie Alexander locked down once again. He actually has the lowest opposing quarterback rating in his coverage now, with Xavier Rhodes allowing the 2 touchdowns this week. So impressive performance by those guys. Anyone else you want to make note of here?
Well, I just wanted to address the run defense that has been, consistent all year. And this Lions game, the previous Lions game, was kind of the one, boo-boo on their schedule, I guess, if you will. And they've, they corrected that in this game. The Lions are only accumulated, I believe, 53 yards on the ground on 15 carries. Let me double check the official. Yeah, nobody had over 20 yards rushing in this game. Amir Abdullah had 6 for 14. Theo Riddick had 5 for 20. The longest run they did give up was 10 from Golden Tate on I believe a jet sweep or whatever. Yeah. So, this run defense, I believe they allow the fewest 10 runs of 10 yards or more on the season. It's by an absurd margin. I believe coming in they were at 10, and the next best was 18. Right. So this run defense has been lights out, and that was kind of the inconsistent part of the defense last year, and now it's corrected, it seems like. And so this is another great performance by them, and I think it's set up the Lions for kind of some of the inaccuracies of Stafford and kind of force them to play that come from behind game, which they do very well. But Stafford was again pressured, and he had to do everything by himself. And when a quarterback has to do that, generally it doesn't work out. You saw Stafford kind of a lot of throws were inaccurate, especially earlier in the game. So I think a lot of credit needs to be given to this Vikings run defense for the way it has stepped up, not just in the Thanksgiving win, but also all season long.
Absolutely. Okay, so I think it's, this performance we got this week warrants talking about the special teams a little bit here.
Yeah.
Because they were absolutely atrocious. And I'm not just talking about Kai Forbath here. McDermott looked bad. Again, I haven't seen the All-22 yet, so it's very difficult to evaluate a long snapper's performance, especially because it's
the blocked field goal attempt was a bad snap and a bad hold. So, and then, the ball was literally completely sideways when Kai Forbath tried to kick it, and it had no chance of going in. It was a spiral basically when he kicked it. No chance.
Complete disaster here for let's blame it on all three of them here. McDermott, obviously Forbath, he had a couple other missed kicks beyond that, just that one. I'm going to pose you a very simple question here, and it's one that you've heard before. Is the special teams / kicking situation something to really be concerned about for this Vikings team?
I'm going to say no, not yet, because I still believe in Kai Forbath in that I think he's still very consistent when he's given the chance to get the ball above the opposing, defense. I'm going to go to a question we got from at Bubka2K5 when he asked us, what's the biggest downside of this Vikings team? I would say it is the special teams, because I thought the coverage teams too yesterday were I thought the Lions had a couple nice big returns. I believe one punt and one kick return were sizable returns, not anything super dangerous. But I do think this special teams is the biggest weakness of the team, and that's mostly a credit to the offense and the defense for the way they are consistently performing every single week. So, but again, I'm not terribly worried about if the Vikings need a field goal down the stretch in one of these key games on the road, either at Atlanta or Carolina. I still think I would feel comfortable with Kai Forbath and this group connecting on a field goal. But yeah, it was definitely a concern yesterday. And again, I thought it was one of the reasons this game was even close in the first place at the end of the game. The Vikings converted on those, couple of attempts or those field goal opportunities, extra point opportunities. This game isn't even what it, I think the real margin of the performances from each team is really shown if that's the case.
So my answer to this is very simple. I'm saying no, it's not a concern right now, because when the Vikings needed a field goal at the end of the game, they connected, which is something we are not used to seeing happen. So for that reason, a clutch situation, heart-pounding situation, Vikings got it done this week. That was nice to see. So for at least another week, I'm going to table this special teams issue, I suppose. See what Mike Prefer says during his midweek, conversation. See what type of issues they're addressing, and see what team comes out next week against Atlanta. But for now, I'm not going to panic. But that definitely was not an acceptable special teams performance. No. They were definitely more of a negative than a positive this week, and that needs to improve. They know that I expect it to improve, but it was definitely nice to see Kai nail down that field goal to make it a 7-point game instead of a 4-point game with 2 minutes Stafford cutting onto the field. Yes. That's a clutch kick. It's not a, quote, game winner, but it was a nail in the coffin kick to a degree. So that's one reason to be optimistic if you're struggling to be optimistic based off of what you saw yesterday from Kai Forbath and co there. So I think that about wraps up the general discussion here. Let's hop into the Twitter takes for the week.
Yeah.
Round out the show here. I do want to touch on the one that you already kind of brought up here. Biggest weakness on this team. You went with special teams. I still think that third linebacker spot in a base defense is probably the biggest. I'm concerned about that just because we saw what happened last year when the Vikings were forced to not play nickel. We haven't seen that a whole lot. I'm going to say that that's the biggest weakness still, but I'm completely okay with special teams. The point that you made about that, because it's definitely the most concerning, and based off history,
recency bias tells me that's probably, for me anyway, that's the correct answer. But I worry. The Vikings aren't in nickel, or they're not in base hardly at all. From when
they aren't, but that's
when I look at. But
that's when they're playing their game, though. My point being here is
right.
If a team
Vikings
comes in and forces them to play their game, like the Colts did last year, then I wonder about Ben Gideon and Emmanuel Lemur, because they haven't looked great in coverage, in my opinion, this year. So that's my biggest weakness. Again, it's kind of ticky-tack because most of this team, is playing very well right now.
If that's your biggest weakness, then the Vikings are doing pretty well, because that's like 30% of their defensive snaps, or even when they have a third linebacker on the field. So that's definitely a good weakness to have if that's the case. Let's get into these here. We have one from Kyle Slaby at the Big Herman. He says he's very two minds about Cold Case, as he says here. As a Vikings fan, I'm thinking about Ryan Fitzmagic in New York a few years ago, but I'm also thinking of a young Kurt Warner. And he says, why must this team find new ways to set us up for disappointment? So are you worried about a Ryan Fitzpatrick type of collapse in Case Keenum, or is that not something you're concerned?
Absolutely. I think you're stupid not to be concerned about the potential for that happening. Because it's honestly,
right, I'll rephrase the question, because I think I want to take away the Viking fan element out of it, because we're always thinking of ways this team could disappoint us. But
right.
Are you as worried? Is Case Keenum? Do you still have that kind of that doubt in your mind about Case Keenum staying consistent like this moving forward, or
no.
do you still think he could have kind of a downfall, a disappointment, or a big kind of one of those 3 interception games that we kind of at first expected him to have at some point, but maybe now?
See, I was thinking about this earlier when we were talking about Case. I do expect him to not play like this every single week. I'm not expecting 280 and 2 touchdowns every week from Case Keenum. I think that we're going to start seeing more games of 230 yards, 1 touchdown, something like that type of thing. But so I'm not worried about the inconsistency. And I think that Case Keenum has earned himself, a mediocre performance here. If he comes out and, throws 2 interceptions against the Falcons on, 62% passing and, 185 yards, I'm not going to be calling for Teddy's name. He is my starting quarterback right now. That's how I feel, and I'm confident in him. But I do think that we're going to see, another Steelers game at some point. I don't know where it's going to pop up on the schedule, but every quarterback has. Think about Ben Roethlisberger earlier this year. This is a guy that people were talking about, should he retire, because that's how poorly he was playing earlier this year. We're going to see bad Case Keenum again. It's going to happen again, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm happy with the guy that we're going to get, and I trust the odds at this point that we're going to get a good enough Case Keenum to win with this defense.
Yeah, sure. I think the thing I look at is, Case Keenum can kind of quote unquote take a step back and kind of regress to what he was playing or how he was playing before the bye, but Vikings are still winning games and they're beating teams rather easily, so that's what I look at this and I say, well, he might go back to quote unquote the old Case Keenum, which was before the bye week, but the Vikings are still going to be in games regardless of who their opponent is, because that defense is hanging strong and that offense really isn't that poor when he is, I guess, off of his game. I think with the exception of that Steelers game, I believe, the Vikings offense can still put up points if he's not on bringing his A game, I guess. So because of that, I still think this Vikings team can play with the best. And then if Case Keenum does play at his best, I think this team is almost unbeatable, with the exception of maybe the Eagles or the Patriots, which brings us to our next question from our buddy Jared at the JRAD, asking, look at standings. We've defeated 2 of the 3 other division leaders at this point, and that's only because the Vikings have not played the Eagles. So he says, so hypothetically, if the Vikings play the Eagles next week, who is the winner?
Where are they playing?
That's my question too. I think the home team wins either way. So that's my.
That was what I was going to say too. I didn't want to give a cliche answer, but I think we said it last week. I mean, these are 2 very evenly matched teams that play similar style of football. Run the ball down your throat, control the clock, play good defense, get a turnover maybe, and expect adequate to above average quarterback play. I mean, these are basically very similar teams.
Yeah,
they're both West Coast schemes as well.
The one thing I was worried about with Philadelphia this year was their secondary. I thought their cornerbacks were, especially their cornerbacks were they were easily taken advantage of in comparison to what they would face most of the season. Especially in that division when you had like Odell and Brandon Marshall and all these guys, and then you had, had Des Bryant in Dallas. I thought they were going to get exposed there, but you've had some injuries. You've had. Injuries to other teams, but you've had, and I think this secondary with Jalen Mills and company have really stepped up, and that back end has played really well. And I think that's the biggest reason for me why Philadelphia is as good as they are, because I've always kind of thought the Eagles could be good, and I thought they'd be like at this point a 7-3 team, but I think that secondary has really lifted them up to the elite status that they are. So this is another. I think both teams are on a similar playing field here, and I think the home team in this hypothetical matchup would win. And right now the Eagles have that edge. So let's hope for an Eagles loss down the stretch.
It would be interesting.
Need that home field advantage, I think.
How much fun would it be to get an NFC Championship game with Everson Griffin versus Jason Peters and Danielle Hunter versus Lane Johnson? I mean, that's the ultimate matchup of pass rushing.
Another big reason the Eagles are doing well.
Right.
Is that offensive line.
And Jason Peters hasn't even been in there. So,
you've got that guy with a super long name, that Walupali Vaitai or something, whatever his name is.
What do we call him last year? Big V? Big V.
Yeah, we called him Big V. And he, by the way, he played really well against the Vikings, which was unfortunate because we thought...
We made a lot of jokes about the Big
Griffin
V,
and
for
company
sure.
were going to be, yeah.
Whatever.
Right. It's time to move on, I think.
Maybe.
From Don... Our buddy at Don from Ohio, what's the worst record you can see the Vikings finishing with this season?
10-6.
10-6.
10-6.
Even at 9-2 right now. Okay.
Even at 9-2. I mean, let's just be real here. Let's look at let's. I love this phrase. I heard Chris Carter say this phrase today. Let's identify what we know. Okay. The Vikings are going to be playing on the road for the next 2 weeks here against 2 very good NFC South teams, Carolina and Atlanta. There's a high potential to lose both those games. In fact, you could make an argument that the odds probably favor both of those 2 teams because the Vikings are going into their house. So let's say they go 0-2 right there. Cincinnati's up next. You feel confident about Cincinnati, but what if Andy Dalton gets hot? He has been a very good quarterback before. Maybe they sneak one out. I don't know. I'm creating a worst case scenario right now. Then you got Green Bay. Let's say Aaron Rodgers comes back. Hypothetically. Let's just say he comes back. That's a different team. All of a sudden, they're going to be more competitive.
I think he probably will come back if the Packers are still alive in the playoff race.
Right.
I think he's eligible week 15 to come back, and I think it's very realistic that he does.
Exactly. So there's that, and then finally Chicago, good young team. It's possible at that point the Vikings will be sitting their starters or resting their starters to a degree in week 17, so they could lose that one as well. I think 10 is probably the floor, but I don't see a reason why this team can't win 14 games right now. Looking at, even with Atlanta and Carolina coming up next, I'm not putting it past them. I'm just saying that let's be reasonable with the floor here, because these are some very good teams coming up in the next 2 weeks.
I'm going to say 11 wins because I really have very little concern about these home games coming up. The Bengals and the Bears at home are very, I like those matchups quite a bit.
On paper, they look great.
Yeah, and the Vikings at home are unbelievable. That Lions game is really the only exception to the Vikings playing bad at home in a very long time. So I really like those two matchups, and if they only win one of those, I'd like to think they would get at least one of these road games. Just mathematically looking at the chances of them playing that bad on the road 3 times in a row. So I think 11-5 is the floor, and that's going to be good enough to win the division. And as far as a first round bye, I think if you look, I believe Philadelphia technically still has that tiebreaker if they were to lose another game. But regardless, I think the first round bye is very much in play, especially if the Rams defeat the Saints this week. That would help quite a bit for the Vikings to get a first round bye, because I think 12-13, probably 12 or 13 wins is going to be enough for the first round bye. I think given 13. That the Vikings do have the tiebreaker though. Right. So if I think that's probably a good measuring stick, 12 wins for that. But regardless, I think 11 wins, anything less than 11 wins, I would be genuinely shocked.
So we both said that the Vikings I guaranteed one more victory. You guaranteed 2 more. So I'm gonna give you 1 lock, and you're gonna give me 2 locks. Yeah. I'm gonna say Cincinnati is the lock, despite just making an argument for Andy Dalton potentially coming out and having a good game. Playing at home, like you said, dominant at home. Not a very good Cincinnati football team in terms of being complete. They don't block well. They can't run the ball well. They don't really know what they're doing to a degree, and they're kind of in shambles. So I'm going to say that that's the lock that guarantees this team's floor is 10 wins. So your 2 locks.
Sure. Yeah, both home games. I mean, I don't think it's a question there. I do think the Packers game, I think people are going to say, well, if they don't have Aaron Rodgers. I think if they don't have Aaron Rodgers, that's probably a lock too. But if they get Aaron Rodgers back,
trust Lambeau Field.
Completely different team.
I'm not messing with Lambeau Field if I don't have to.
Packers just got beat 23-0 at home.
I understand that
by the Ravens.
I understand that, but just I'm not going to use that as my lock. I'm not going to say that Lambeau Field is a lock.
If Aaron Rodgers is on IR for good, I would for sure use that as a lock, and I would feel good about 12 wins for this team because of it.
Fair enough. All right, moving on to the next one here.
Our last one here from Tom Wesenberg at Allen1970 page. He says he was at the game. Very gritty win. The run game stunk with a few exceptions. Seemed like every series we ran on first down and gained like a yard. Both teams looked tired and sloppy, but at the end of the day, the Vikings are 9-2. So were you concerned about Pat Shurmur's play calling with, running on first down, or is that not something that bothers you?
It didn't. It bothered me as a fan. Like, the fan in me was like, do something different, like call something else. But a lot of those plays are like setup plays for something else that happens later on in the game. Sometimes you have to run your guy into a wall in order to have the play action fake work later on. So, in real time, yeah, super frustrating to see Pat Shurmur call a run play basically every first down. But as far as, what he was concocting, it ultimately worked. So
yeah.
I wasn't concerned with the play calling, just a little frustrated, as all of us probably were, seeing Murray or McKinnon run into, a brick wall a couple times. In that second half.
I mean, the thing I think about is, I think the Washington game, one of the first plays of the game was that play action deep shot to the Diggs, and I think that was partially set up by how Minnesota had run the ball frequently on first down. Right. And in the past, this has been a problem with this team. When Adrian Peterson and Norv Turner were in town, it was something like 70+% of the time the Vikings were running on first down, which is just absurd.
Right.
But the Vikings have been so good in play action this season, and Case Keenum has been so efficient in those plays that I can't really fault Pat Shurmur too much for doing this. I was kind of waiting for that first down play action play to happen. I thought they might do it as they were trying to wind down the clock and kind of catch Detroit off guard and maybe sneak in an extra first down and just really end the game at whatever 27-23 or whatever the score was. But I would like that to be changed a little bit moving forward. That's kind of the one knock I had from Shurmur in this game, was that he never really did take that chance on play action. And maybe he was waiting for a better chance. Maybe, there's obviously other circumstances that we'll never understand as guys that just watch the game, not behind the scenes. But, I think the fact once play action kind of starts to falter and the success and the rate of attempts that they have of it, because I think they do it at a very high rate. Once that starts to falter, then I think you can look at this high tendency to run on first down and be concerned.
Yeah, for the most part, though, overall, very happy with Shurmur, very happy with how the offense played as a whole. Like I said before, the running game wasn't necessarily great on paper, but when they needed to get big runs, we saw that happen. just overall phenomenal offensive performance. A strange defensive performance, a defensive performance that I don't expect to see again this year. I don't think we're going to see Xavier Rhodes allow 100 yards for a long time. But, if there is one guy that could put up 100 on him, he is coming to, we'll be visiting him in Atlanta next week. So that is the show.
One more question for you. One more question. Is the NFC North locked up?
Yes.
Yes, okay. I agree.
Yeah, I thought that. I think we said it, coming into this game.
Yep.
If you get that 3-game advantage plus you nullify
the Vikings will
tiebreaker,
have at least one home playoff game. That's pretty cool. We know that after, we know that Friday of Week 12.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a pretty damn good team. I'm definitely enjoying it. Hopefully all of you guys are as well. Hopefully you guys all had a fantastic Thanksgiving holiday. Best wishes to you and yours from the About the Labor podcast. Thanks for joining us post-Thanksgiving here. We will be back later on this week since the Vikings are not playing on Sunday. Our game plan right now is to run a live stream through Shindig, YouTube, and hopefully Periscope around 3 p.m. Central Time. Again on Sunday, we'll be talking about some of the film we saw today, and then probably making fun of some other teams and talking down about other teams because we have 9 wins right now and most teams don't. So that's the game plan for moving forward here. After that, we'll be back later on. Starting next week, we'll get back to the Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule with this weird week kind of shaking things up. So we'll do something on Monday, figure that out in that time, and hopefully we'll see you guys on Sunday for the pregame show. Or I guess it's still the pregame show, but no game. You know what I'm saying. And we'll catch you guys later on this week. And, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, iHeartRadio. Hit the subscribe button on YouTube. I think that's about it. So thanks for listening, folks, and we'll catch you guys later on this week.